Welcome to An Ounce of Blood. My name is Michael, and I like horror movies. Tonight, I'm going to talk about a movie called Sleepwalker. In Sleepwalker, released in 2017, Anna O'Reilly stars as Sarah Foster, the widow of a famous and critically acclaimed author who recently killed himself.
Please! Jonathan!
Since the suicide, Sarah has been suffering from nightmares, sleepwalking, and ill-advised clothing choices. After being awakened by a police officer while she's on a somnambulant stroll miles from her apartment, where she lives with a roommate, she decides she needs to seek help. That night, she goes to a sleep center where the doctor, played by Thorin from the Hobbit movies, looking taller than I remember, takes a special interest in her unusual brainwaves and wants her to spend several more nights at the center. I've used that line before. After a surprisingly good night's sleep, Sarah discovers, the next morning, that her name is now Sarah Wells, not Sarah Foster. Her driver's license, roommate, and childhood journals all confirm it. She goes back to the sleep center that night and completely fails to mention this seemingly vital fact to her brain doctor.
He and I are both your doctors if you want to tell me what's happening.
Oh, I'd rather wait for Dr. White.
The next morning, things get even weirder. Her roommate is a completely different person, people that should know her don't, and her clothing choices are getting even stranger. She decides to sleep at her apartment that night instead of going back to the sleep center, but nevertheless she dreams of being attacked by a strange woman and wakes up to an even more changed reality. She doesn't live in her apartment anymore, her roommate has a different roommate, and she is being stalked by Haley Joel Osment, which would definitely scare the shit out of anybody. So, naturally, she takes some pills, drinks a bunch of vodka, and sleeps in the laundry room. Coincidentally, that's the exact treatment I use for my own sleep disorder, so this plot development really resonated with me. As it turns out, this is quite effective as things are mostly back to normal the next day. She once again lives in her apartment, her old roommate is back, and she decides to tell her brain doctor about all the strange things that have been happening. She probably should have done that in Act 1, but it doesn't really matter because he has no idea what to do about any of it, except to invite her to sleep at his place. I mean, she's reasonably attractive, and he's the world's tallest dwarf, so why not? The next morning, Sarah wakes up in a different house, her doctor is a different man, and Sarah Wells is somebody else.
I'm here to see Dr. White.
That's me.
Then who am I?
You tell me.
So I suppose this movie falls into the mindfuck subgenre of horror. Things get progressively weirder as Sarah jumps around between the various realities, not sure if she's dreaming the whole thing, going crazy or what. And through most of it, Sarah exhibits mild concern and vague confusion. And that's really the problem with this movie. While it does achieve a sort of dreamlike feel, largely through the use of an ambient soundscape, it's not really weird enough or intense enough to sell the mindfuck aspect. Sarah is very passive and somewhat indifferent to what's happening to her, and so I don't really care all that much either. The other problem is the ending. It's pretty clear from early on that this is one of those movies that's leading up to a moment that's supposed to redefine everything you've just seen and make you go, oh shit! You know, like that other movie Haley Joel Osment was in? Well, in this one, it's so muddled that I have no fucking idea what was the thing we were supposed to think the movie was versus what the ending is saying the movie actually is. To redefine everything that comes before requires it to have been defined in the first place, and then for the redefinition to be solid enough that we understand what's happening now.
But it wasn't a dream. It was a place. And you, and you, and you, And you were there.
Neither really happens here, so it ends up as a bunch of competing strands of reality, which is neither satisfyingly conclusive nor compellingly vague.
It belonged to a man I met in a half-remembered dream.
I'm of the opinion that these gotcha endings are overused even when done well. When done poorly, they're little more than an excuse for a badly constructed and nonsensical story, which is exactly the problem with Sleepwalker.
Do you like it when I watch you?
So I'm going to give it 2.5 stars out of 5. The half star is for Sarah spending half the movie wandering around in her underwear, even in the rain. So if you got nothing better to do, give Sleepwalker a watch. Or don't. I don't really care, and you probably won't either. So, until next time, here's blood in your eye. Pretty good blood.